A young child stands barefoot in the middle of a field. It's night. The sky above is a velvet black, littered with light, the stars gleaming like scattered diamonds. There's very little light pollution here, just a riot of sound, cicadas and spring peepers filling the lovely night. The child hears none of that. The earth around him, lost beneath the bright, burning questions alive in the universe above him. He doesn't know the names of the stars, doesn't know about hydrogen or galaxies or orbital mechanics. But he knows this: something up there is calling. It's not a sound, not a word. It's a pull, a longing, a dare. For me, that was how it began. The Milky Way fanning out above me. That night, so many decades ago, I lost a part of myself, a part I've never been able to reclaim. For many of us, this experience, or one like it, gets to be formative, maybe even electrifying. I remember myself being transfigured, paralyzed in a wash of starlight, and I can imagine how this might have been for others, for maybe even our earliest ancestors, gazing upward with bafflement, curiosity, and wonder. I like to imagine that the first stirrings of religion were born this way, in awe. It doesn't take a poet to see the canopy of night as humanity's very first cathedral. The star-filled sky, our first scripture. And I have no doubt that somewhere deep in the soul of humanity, across all cultures and all centuries, that longing, that call, has never really left us. We are still pulled upward and outward by something older than language and more enduring than fear. This is what we were made for, some tiny voice whispers. We were made for wonder. The heavens have always called us upward. In every civilization we have record of, there have been those who looked up. Gilgamesh followed the stars to the edge of the world, seeking immortality. Polynesian sailors used them to navigate vast oceans in search of new lands. Astronomers in Babylon, Egypt, China, and Mesoamerica created calendars and built temples aligned with celestial bodies. The stars have always been guides, gods, omens, mysteries, beckoning us to seek, to risk, to reach beyond ourselves, to look up and ask questions that begin with, what if? But it was only recently, in the lifetimes of those of you here in this room, that we began to answer those questions. Some of you here remember what it was like in the 1950s and 60s, and no, I'm not going to call you out. But you'll remember that the world had emerged battered and exhausted from World War II. Unlike today, the United States was respected and strong. Our economy booming in those post-war years. The people confident, industry thriving. The trauma of the Great Depression was fading into memory, replaced by suburban expansion, the explosion of the middle class, and the mercantile glow of modern convenience. But amid this prosperity, fear was growing. The Red Scare gripped us. The Soviet Union, once our ally against fascism, had become the new enemy. Communism was the boogeyman. So Senator Joseph McCarthy saw communists around every corner. Conformity was encouraged. Dissent was dangerous. The Cold War was escalating. And suddenly, in a blink, America was losing that war. In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. For a polished sphere no larger than a beach ball, its impact was cataclysmic. TV and radio imagined it constantly beeping over our heads. But Sputnik wasn't just a technical marvel. It was a symbol that America was being left behind. In response, the United States poured resources into science education, rocketry, and aerospace development. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, was established in 1958. But before America could even catch its breath, the Soviets jumped forward again. On April 12, 1961, a 27-year-old Soviet pilot named Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin became the first human to leave the Earth and orbit our planet. Gagarin, the son of a carpenter and dairy farmer, rose from humble beginnings. He lived through the Nazi occupation of Russia, experienced hunger and hardship, and became a pilot because he loved to fly. He was chosen out of over 200 candidates, not only for his skill, but for his calm under pressure, his charisma, and his ability to inspire. The launch was dangerous. No one knew if the human body could survive the stresses of launch and spaceflight. It was a mission that could easily have ended in tragedy. But Gagarin's capsule rose into the sky, punched out of the atmosphere, and orbited the Earth in just over 100 minutes. The very first words spoken from space were his. He said, I quote, "I see the Earth. It is so beautiful." There have been many moments when history lurched forward, when the fate of humanity changed. That day was one of them. The stars were no longer out of reach. The era of human spaceflight had begun. And it was just a year later, in 1962, when President John Kennedy delivered that speech that echoed courage. Speaking at Rice, he said, "We choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard." It's a statement of pure bravado. Many believed at that time that the task was impossible, and that Kennedy's confidence just bordered on rank arrogance. But it was more than that, though, that speech. What he gave us was a statement of vision, a call to greatness, a dare. 5 years after Gagarin's flight and 4 years after Kennedy's moonshot challenge, we got another one. Star Trek. At first glance, the show was low-budget science fiction. The years, fortunately, have been kind, and today the show has come to mean quite a bit more. It's a subversive dream written in stardust. Another dare, like I said, because Star Trek imagined a humanity that transcended ancient divisions. In the show, the Cold War was over. Hunger and poverty were gone. Planet Earth was united in purpose and spirit. Technology was used not to dominate, but to explore. Curiosity and diplomacy were our highest values. In this future, the crew of the Enterprise traveled to the stars not to conquer or colonize, but to learn, to discover, to grow. The bridge of the starship was diverse. Black, white, Asian, Russian, male, female, alien. And all of them were treated with dignity. All were respected. And this mattered. In the 1960s, even with McCarthy gone, the national stage was hardly quiet. The civil rights movement was raging. Women were fighting for equality. Cold War kids were still learning duck and cover. Yet on TV, there was a black woman, Uhura, in a position of authority, a Japanese man, Sulu, flying a starship, a Russian, Chekhov, was working side by side American colleagues only a handful of years after the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then there was this half-human, half-Vulcan science officer named Spock, the living embodiment of the humanist ideal, blending logic and compassion and using both equally to become a better leader, a better person, and a better friend. Star Trek imagined a different path, and this vision inspired a generation, not just dreamers, writers, and artists, but scientists, engineers, and astronauts. Mae Jemison, the first black woman in space, cited Lieutenant Uhura as one of her primary role models. Star Trek wasn't just television. It was a catechism for a different kind of future. It taught us that any journey outward must also be a journey inward, toward justice, unity, and wisdom. It was more than entertainment. It was a blueprint for who we could become. A television show that gave us a vision of possibility unfolding directly from Kennedy's speech, that we could do amazing things, not because they were easy, but in spite of that. We would go and go boldly because it was important, because the universe was too vast and too amazing to ignore. After Apollo came Voyager. Human dreams launched toward alien suns. And a young Carl Sagan who provoked us with poetry and purpose. Sagan reminded us that the carbon in our cells, the calcium in our bones, the iron in our blood, every atom of it was forged, literally forged, in the hearts of dying stars. Sagan reminded us that we are not in the universe, we are the universe, awakened, aware, and wondering. And that we were just the start of the greatest mystery ever told. For as he told us, somewhere, something incredible was waiting to be known. Through his book and television series Cosmos, which ran for one short season in the fall of 1980, Sagan invited us all to see the universe not just as material, but as majesty, not just as data, but as magic. And that to gaze into the depths of space was not to look away from our world, but to see it more clearly. At his suggestion, NASA aimed Voyager 1's camera back toward Earth. This was 1990, 13 years after Voyager's launch. And that's when they captured the image that we now call the pale blue dot. Our home, our Earth, the sum total of human history, merely a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Of that image, Sagan said, quote, "It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world." Sagan had more to say of our folly and our future, but this next quote stuck with me. He said, "The surface of the earth is the shore of the cosmic ocean. On this shore, we've learned most of what we know. Recently, we've waded a little way out, maybe ankle deep, and the water seems inviting. Some part of our being knows this is where we came from. We long to return, and we can, because the cosmos is also within us. We are made of star stuff." For me, Sagan didn't just teach science. He taught reverence. From him, I learned that to wonder is to worship. As we turn to the close, I have a confession. I love talking about space. I am endlessly inspired by the stunning images coming out of the James Webb Space Telescope. And if you have the curiosity, I cannot recommend the NASA archives enough. Your computer's wallpaper have never looked so good. And yes, for the record, I know I'm weird. Just as I know that many of you are asking, why bother talking about science and space at a time like this? When democracy teeters, when facts are under attack, when wars rage and forests burn. Why gaze at stars when our feet are stuck in floodwaters, in economic collapse, in moral fatigue? And I would answer that very normal, very human question this way. We should celebrate Yuri's night precisely because of all of that. Not because we're nostalgic for a yesterday far different from today, not to invoke a time when America was great, not to avoid the seriousness of the struggle we are currently in. No. We should celebrate because we're not done yet. Because dreaming is always how the future begins. In a world unraveling, in a time challenged by political unrest, massive inequality, endless war, and an unfolding climate catastrophe, we need bold visions now, more than ever. And we need them not just in policy or in protest, but in the deep inner work of hope, of imagination, of courage. Because we need something bigger than survival. We need something more than just change. We need something to live for. Because the truth is, survival is not enough. Bread alone will never feed an aching soul. We need dreams. We need awe. We need to imagine ourselves not as only ensnared by the woes of today, but still lifted by the dreams of yesterday, by the memory that we, you and I, we are responsible for turning those dreams into the realities of tomorrow. We live in a time when billionaires dominate the narrative of space, not as explorers, but as exploiters. They see the heavens as real estate, a personal playground for profit. But the stars do not belong to the wealthy. Wonder can never be reduced to a commodity. Space is not a luxury. Up there is our human inheritance, a shared heritage, our destiny. And that little voice, that's the spirit of adventure, whispering forever of the great journeys still ahead. Yuri's night reminds me that even in times of fear and division, even in times of breathtaking stupidity and astonishing ignorance, we are still capable of doing things that are awesome, unifying, and beautiful. Big things, great things. Yuri's night reminds me that even when everything feels like it's falling apart, we can still reach up, still dream, still dare. Yuri's night reminds me that we need the stars, not to flee the troubles of earth, but to remember what earth means to us. We need wonder, not as escapism, but as endurance, as resistance, as the raw material from which new possibilities must be built. You may remember I mentioned Teilhard de Chardin last week and his suggestion that the universe was not winding down, but waking up. That he envisioned a cosmos that was evolving, not just physically, but spiritually, from particles to people. He saw creation pressing forward toward greater unity, consciousness, and love. And each act of courage, each spark of curiosity, each leap of imagination was the universe becoming more aware of itself. For Teilhard, this dream was not pointless fantasy. It was a promise, a participation in a sacred unfolding. The ultimate end of what our own Unitarian ancestor, James Freeman Clarke, saw as the progressive goal of human history, onward, upward, forever. And God help me, today I'm inspired. And maybe in the end, that's why Yuri's night matters most. Precisely because it is a ritual of remembrance and a renewal of purpose, for we are not done becoming. We dare to keep imagining even when we stumble. We dare to reach even in the dark. We dare to rise even when hope is hardest. And today, we are reminded that sometimes all it takes, a clear night and a glance up. And then we remember who and what we really are. So let the cynics whisper that dreams are for the naive. Let the timid shrink in fear. Let the foolish praise their own short-sightedness. We can still lift our gaze because we are not here to merely endure the present. We're here to forge a future. We're not here to flee the darkness. We are here to kindle new light. We're not here to accept limits. We're here to transcend them. In our wonder lies our strength. In our questions lie our wisdom. In our reaching lie our purpose. We are not just creatures of earth. We are the children of stars. We carry galaxies in our blood and constellations in our dreams. This is our home. That is our birthright. And that is why we will boldly go onward, upward, together, as far as wonder can reach. Amen.
Visit us at uusg.org.